BMW states lifetime drivetrain fluid on this vehicle. We don't think so. My name's Cole from FCP Euro, and today we're going to show you how to service the front and rear differentials and transfer case on your G05 X5. So on the G05 X5 chassis, the differential fluid and transfer case fluids are a very touchy subject. And today we're going to show you everything that you need to know about differential and transfer case fluid for this vehicle. In front of us, we have three different kits here. We have a service kit for the front differential, a service kit for the transfer case, and a service kit for the rear differential. For these fluid service kits, we do offer genuine OE, OEM, and aftermarket options, and they come with our lifetime replacement guarantee. The two black bottles here are going to be the genuine BMW fluid. That's the stuff that comes with your car from the factory, and it's BMW branded. It's a great option for people who want to use just BMW parts in their vehicle. In the middle, we have the S-Tech transfer case service kit, and this is made by the OE manufacturer, and that means that it is the same exact fluid that is put in the transfer case on the assembly line. And for the rear differential, we're going to be using the aftermarket Febby Bilstein kit. Same quality, but a little bit more budget-minded. All of these service kits come with the appropriate hardware. However, for the front differential, we have to remove the front cross brace, and that is going to be different from vehicle to vehicle. So you'll see in front of us, we have the hardware for this specific G05 X5 to remove that cross brace, and it'll be linked in the description below. One thing to note, the hardware that you're going to need is going to be dependent on your vehicle. Now to begin, we're going to talk about the transfer case service on this vehicle because it is a very touchy subject. On the G05 X5, it is known that the transfer case have issues. From the factory, BMW actually states that the fluid is lifetime, and we all know that is not true. So BMW actually has starting to take action of this and change the fluid out based on customer symptoms. Well, what are some of those symptoms that we're hearing or seeing or feeling? Those symptoms include noise from the transfer case, shuddering, binding, or even premature failure of that transfer case. Now we can start seeing these issues on the transfer case on these vehicles anywhere from 30 to 60,000 miles. Now that can not only happen on the X5 of this generation, but also the X6 and X7 chassis. One fun fact about performing this transfer case service is that it usually fixes most of these problems that we have. So it might not just be changing the fluid, this actually may be a solution to your issues. If this service kit does not fix your transfer case, most likely you will have to replace it. Here at FCP Euro, we recommend replacing the transfer case fluid every 50,000 miles. Not only does the transfer case have issues on these vehicles, the front and rear differentials do as well. And BMW states that the fluid inside these differentials is lifetime, which we do not agree with. Now, some symptoms of a failing differential on these vehicles can include bearing noise, grinding, or clunking. And some BMW owners even have mentioned that these differentials have exploded on them, causing catastrophic failure, not only in the differential, but other places as well. Here at FCP Euro, we recommend servicing the front and rear differentials every 60,000 miles to improve their lifespan. Now that we covered all of these service kits, let's get into the tools that we're going to need for this DIY. We will need an arrangement of sockets, including a 18mm socket, 16mm, 8mm, 14mm Allen key, and an E10 E-Torx. We'll need a set of torque wrenches ranging from 19 Newton meters all the way up to 60 Newton meters. A set of ratchets for your sockets, some different lengths of extensions in shorter and longer, a flathead screwdriver, a fluid pump, some brake clean to clean up the job. There is a BMW special tool for filling the transfer case. If you don't have that, you're going to need some 3/16 metal bendable brake line. You will need a scan tool that can perform the transfer case oil change function. In this case, we have an Autel MX808 that has its current software revision on it. Optional that always makes the job easier is some electric power tools with electric ratchet, electric impact, and an electric screwdriver. And to make pulling the drain plug out a little bit easier, we like using the OTC Drain Plug Pro tool. With all this covered, let's go inside the cabin and start this DIY. To perform the transfer case service on this vehicle, you actually have to put it in service mode. That opens some flaps inside of the transfer case so we can extract all of the fluid from it. To do that, you're going to need a scan tool that is up to date. In this case, we're using a Autel MX808 that has the current revision of software on it. Now, we're going to turn the ignition on by pressing the start-stop button 3 times. Now, with our vehicle already selected, we're going to go to service. Then we're going to click powertrain, then we're going to click transfer box VTG. Now we're going to select transfer box oil change, and this is going to run us through a series of procedures that will open up some flaps in the transfer case box so we can extract all the fluid. So we're going to say that all the fluid needs to be changed by selecting F1 here. It's going to say that we only can have certain fault codes, certain temperature the fluid has to be, so we have to do this cold. And now it's going to run through a series of self-tests to then open the flaps. It's asking for me to start the engine right now. It'll automatically shut off the engine in the procedure and turn the ignition on a couple times. Just continue to run through this until it says that the flaps are now open and we can change the fluid. Now it's saying that we can change the fluid. So the only last thing that we need to do if your vehicle is equipped with air suspension is disable the air suspension. To disable the air suspension, we're just going to hold down this switch for 7 seconds and then release. Now let's turn off the ignition and raise the vehicle up to start our services. With our vehicle safely lifted up in the air, we're going to start by removing this plastic piece to start gaining access to the transfer case, because that's probably the reason why you're watching this video. With an 8mm socket and electric screwdriver, we're going to remove the 11 screws that are holding this plastic panel on. With that last screw removed, we can slide back and pull this panel down. Now, to access the fill hole, we're going to have to remove this cross brace, and to do that, we're going to have to support the transmission and transfer case on the back here. So if you're doing this on the floor, you can use a jack underneath this to support it, some blocks of wood, whatever is going to keep this from falling too far down. In our case, we have a pull jack here, so we're just going to thread this up so we can hold the transfer case and transmission assembly from falling down. Now, since this is metal on metal, we want a little buffer here, so if you have some wood laying around, it's a good idea to put that underneath between whatever you're jacking this up with. All right, we got it supported here. We're just going to preload it a little bit just so it's not dropping down. The first step to remove this brace is to remove this bolt that holds the mount to the brace. To do that, we're going to need a 18mm socket and ratchet on one side, and on the other side of this bolt, we're going to need a 16mm socket and another ratchet. We're just going to break this free here and remove this bolt. It can be a little tricky to get this bolt out, so to aid in that, we can get behind with a screwdriver and then continue to ratchet it out. With an E10 socket and a little extension, we're going to remove the 6 bolts here that hold this brace on and pull it away. Now, something to mention when pulling those bolts out, they are different lengths, so we're going to have to put them in the same spot when we put it back up here. Just a little bit of prying and this thing comes right out. With a 14mm socket and a ratchet, we're going to now remove this fill plug. At this point, we are going to need a special tool from BMW. It's around $90, and if you don't want to spend that much money, with some 3/16 brake line, you can make your own tool too. So here we have a piece of 3/16 brake line. We've bent it in a certain way that it has a little hook here so we can fish it down into the transfer case. This might take a little time to figure out what bend works best for you, but one thing to mention, when you bend this brake line, be very careful not to kink it. So use a finger and slightly bend it around your finger. Here we found the measurement that works best for us. So we have our adapter from our CTA fluid pump here to go to the smaller hose, and you'll see it's a little bit too big. So one thing we can do to make it fit is use a little bit of electrical tape to build up the circumference of this brake line. install it into this adapter and then put some tape around the outside to seal it up. I'm just doing a little fitment check here. Yeah, there we go. We want a nice snug fit with the rubber here so it seals that union and it can extract fluid. Just to be safe, we're going to take a little bit of electric tape and wrap around the outside. Now that we just made a BMW specialty tool with parts that we had laying around the garage, let's get back to the vehicle and extract that fluid. So at this point, we can use two tools. We can use a fluid pump, or you can use the BMW specialty tool pump, which you can actually suck and fill with this one hose. For this case, we're going to use the BMW specialty tool, but you can use a syringe. So with our little adapter that we made here, we're just going to install it on the end of this tool from BMW. Now with that on the tool, we can come up here and install our suction hose into the transfer case. Now we're going to want to make sure that it all the way bottoms out to this part of the case, and that's going to be the lowest section of the transfer case where we're going to suck all the fluid out of. Now with this inserted into the transfer case, we can squeeze this and continue to pump out all the fluid. Now since this is a very small hole, it might take a little bit for us to get all the fluid out. All right, we've gotten to the point where squeezing this bulb here, no more fluid is coming out, so that's an indication that we've sucked out as much fluid as possible. Now we're going to take this tool out, remove it from our suction and fill tool, and then start filling the transfer case. Now using our OE S-Tech transfer case fluid, we're going to insert the thick plastic portion into the bottle and then take the metal end and hook it on the transfer case. Now with that inserted, we can squeeze the bulb to fill the transfer case until fluid starts dripping out. All right, we have fluid coming out of the fill hole now, so we're going to let this come down to a drip and then install the new provided fill plug. We're going to install this plug by hand and then come back with our torque wrench and torque it to 60 Newton meters. We can now use some brake clean to clean the area and start reassembling this part of the vehicle. So now we're just going to slide this up here. Getting over the rear transmission mount / transfer case mount can be a little tricky, and give it a little tap. So with that in place, we're going to install the longer screws first. There's one here, one here, one here, and then all the rest shorter screws. There's going to be 6 screws in total. We're just threading these in by hand, so we're not going to cross thread anything, and then come back with our wrench and torque them to specification. For these 2 holes over here, an extension in a socket is essential to get them to thread in properly. With our E10 socket, extension, and torque wrench, we're going to tighten all of these bolts down to 19 Newton meters. Now take the bolt that we removed from this mount and start to reinstall it. It may be helpful to either lower the transmission with your jack, or in this case, we're using a screw jack to align the holes and make that bolt slide through nicely. With a 16mm socket and ratchet on the bolt side and an 18mm socket and ratchet on the nut side, we're going to reinstall this bolt, snug it up, and then torque it to spec. With our 16mm socket and ratchet, we're going to counter hold the bolt side and then come in with our torque wrench and 18mm socket and tighten this down to 68 Newton meters. At this point in the video, we're going to continue with replacing the fluid in the front differential. However, if you're just doing a transfer case service, after putting this cover back on, you're going to go back into the vehicle and take it out of service mode. With that, let's proceed to the front diff. To access the front differential area, we're going to have to remove this chassis stiffening brace. And to do that, we'll need a 16mm socket with a wrench, or in this case, we're using an impact gun. Now, all of this hardware is one-time use. So if you are removing this plate, be sure to buy the new proper hardware. Now, before removing your last bolt, it's good to counter hold this plate and just crack that bolt loose, so once it's loose, you can reposition yourself to remove the plate. We're now going to have to remove this panel to gain access to the fill plug. To do that, we're going to take an 8mm socket and a ratchet and remove these 5 screws holding it on. With this panel removed, we can take a 14mm Allen socket with a large extension and come around the axle here to install it into the fill plug and then remove it. With the same tool, we're going to take our 14mm Allen socket and crack it free and then pull the plug out completely to drain all the fluid. One tool that's awesome to use is this OTC Drain Plug Pro tool, and what it lets you do is pull this drain plug out while be able to pull it to the side and not make a mess. With our new drain plug included in the kit, we're going to thread it in and then tighten it down to 60 Newton meters. To fill this front differential, we'll need 600 milliliters of this genuine BMW front differential oil. Now, there is a disclaimer by BMW that states if you fill to the fill hole and let it drain out, you're going to be overfilling the front differential. So we have a measuring device here that we're going to pour one of these bottles in and then a little bit of the other one. Each of these bottles is 500 milliliters. So we're going to measure this out and then use our transfer pump to fill the differential. Right about there. Now taking the metal end, we're going to put it up here in the fill hole and then put all this differential fluid up here. We're just going to squeeze this bulb and empty this beaker. All right. Now let's clean up our area here, install our new fill plug, and tighten that to 60 Newton meters. Again, we do not want this gear oil to be flowing out of the fill hole. And then coming around through the fender well here, using that same 14mm Allen socket, we're going to come to this fill plug and then tighten this down to 60 Newton meters. Now taking our plastic cover here, we're going to fish it back up into the wheel well and reinstall. These 5 screws just thread into plastic, so do not over tighten them. Now grabbing our stiffening plate and the hardware that is not included in the kit, however, it's linked in the description below, we're going to reinstall this loosely and then come back and tighten everything to specification. These bolts have a 2-step torquing procedure. We're going to initially torque them to 56 Newton meters, and then we're going to come back and rotate each one an additional 90 degrees. With our 16mm socket and our torque wrench, we're just going to come here and set the initial torque on all these fasteners. To set the angle, we're using a digital torque wrench. If you do not have a torque wrench with angle measurement on it, you can use a Sharpie and mark the bolt and the tightening surface to approximate the measurement of 90 degrees. We're going to start at the edge here and work our way around and then do the 2 inner bolts. We're just going to take some marking material here to let us know that we have tightened that one to 90 degrees. Now we can come back with this trim cover and reinstall it. It does slide into this little tongue here, so we're going to make sure that that is slid on and then install the screws. You'll need an 8mm socket and a screwdriver to reinstall these screws. Now let's move on to the rear diff service. With our 14mm Allen socket, we're going to come in here and remove this fill plug here. Now you'll notice that there isn't a drain plug on this rear differential, and that's because we're going to have to suck the fluid out of the rear differential. We're going to be using BMW's fancy tool to extract the fluid from this. However, you can use a syringe to get down to the bottom, but one thing you want to make sure is that you get as much fluid out as possible. There is a little adapter here that is sold separately that will help us get all that fluid out. We're just going to slide this over our tool here and then insert it into the differential. With that now in place, we're going to just pump this bulb. With sucking on that straw as much as possible, we're going to remove this and now fill it with gear oil. Grabbing our Febby 70W80, we're going to be pumping this into the rear diff. Place your little end right here and then just start pumping that bulb and transferring that fluid inside. All right, we're going to let this drip out and then install our new fill plug. Now take the new provided fill plug, install it, and torque this to 60 Newton meters. We're just going to clean this up with some brake clean. Now that we've done all of our fluid services down underneath, let's get back in the vehicle and deactivate the oil change procedure on the transfer case. Now that we've completed the service on the transfer case, we're going to turn the ignition back on by pressing the start-stop button 3 times and continue with the procedure. We're going to go back into the transfer box oil change function, and now we're going to select F2, which is stating that we need to reset the service interval for the transfer case. Now what this does is it resets the indicators for the oil wear. Now on the screen here it says that everything has been reset. And that's it. If your vehicle does have air suspension, we're going to want to reactivate it right now by doing the same steps of holding the down switch on the air suspension for 7 seconds and then releasing it. And that wraps up performing the services on the transfer case and differentials on the G05 X5. If you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, drop them in the comments section below. We have a lot more DIYs coming for the G05 X5 chassis and many more. So if you want to keep up to date, hit that subscribe button. My name's Cole from FCP Euro. Thanks for watching. Keep on wrenching.